Well, both the August primary and November elections in St. Johns County showed that voters were casting their ballot for slowed growth. What does that look like in one of the fastest growing counties in the country? Well, here to help us sort through the rhetoric and the reality is Noah Hertz. He's the St. Johns County reporter for Jacksonville Today. Good morning, Noah.
Morning, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, just this morning, this newly constituted commission is taking office.
Yeah, about 10 minutes ago from when I jumped on here, there was elections for the new board chair and the new board vice chair. They swore in the two new folks who were elected for the St. Johns County Commission. And, I'd say that the most interesting thing about all of that is now the five-person board has a three-person majority of people who have committed to slowing down the growth in St. Johns County. Now, you asked, what does that look like? I don't think anybody really knows yet. I've talked to these people and they are adamant that they really want to slow down residential growth in the county, not necessarily commercial, industrial, other kind of business growth, but they were elected by a groundswell of people who overwhelmingly believe that, the roads are too crazy, there's too many people just packed into too tight of a place, and they want to see change there.
And the idea there, I guess, is that infrastructure would have an opportunity to catch up to the pace of growth, which has been so intense.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes. I mean, St. Johns County has grown at such an explosive rate. Like anybody who's driven around that area knows that those roads just do not really have the support they need in a lot of places to actually accommodate all the people who live there.
so you cover the county, and so you cover a lot of these commission meetings. There's always a lot of appellants coming, saying, please give us permission to build this additional development. Recently, a really major development that you were covering down there got denied, which is unusual, even before this new commission was fully constituted.
Yeah, this was a really interesting case. This developer, you had somebody on the show not too long ago talking about it. They were billing it as something called an agrihood,
Mhm.
which basically means, it's still going to be more than 3,000 single family homes west of St. Augustine. But the idea was that it would include some elements that were relating back to the historically agricultural character of the area. It would have included a community farm. It would have included, some other agricultural elements, as they were saying, in this project. But at the end of the day, when it came before the county commission, the verdict was still, this is a nice looking project. One of the complaints they had was that the project plan was not properly outlined yet. So one of the key questions was, where's the farm going to go? And at the end of the day, it was between that and it was the traffic. They said, look, the infrastructure just can't handle it at this point. And it'll be interesting to see where that goes because, it's the applicant could make the argument that it's not really their fault that the county hasn't kept up with the infrastructure. It's cascading developments that have continued to come in over the last couple decades.
Right, and as you well know, I mean, there is a lot of development that is, quote, unquote, "in the pipeline," right? It has already been approved by either these current commissioners or their predecessors, and there is no stopping that growth.
Yeah, I had a conversation last week with one of the new commissioners who, like I said, was just sworn in. He's now the vice chair of the county commission, Clay Murphy. He was telling me that, the next 5 or so years, they don't really have that much of a say in those developments. Those are developments that have been approved by the last commission and maybe even the commission before that because the scope of some of these developments is such that they can't be completed in a matter of 6 months to a year. It's something that takes years of planning and constructing before even that first unit can be sold.
So the commission races have been competitive, no different this year. A lot of those are financed largely or significantly by the development community. Is there any difference in terms of how these campaigns were waged or financed, the role that development played in who was, helping to pay for their campaigns?
I mean, it's one thing to say that the 2 candidates who won, Clay Murphy and Ann Taylor, won as maybe a referendum on the growth and the pace of growth in the community, but I mean, just looking at the amount of money that was fundraised between them and their opponents, I mean, their win was monumental if you look at it in just those terms. The amount of money that their opponents, the incumbents before them, had compared to how much money they had raised was crazy. I mean, we're talking orders of 10 times more dollars in their campaign coffers than some of these candidates had, and they still won. They still got the support of the local Republican Party. They still got the support of a lot of people in the area, and some of these races were close, but they're on the county commission now. And, as of this morning, the new chair of the county commission is Krista Joseph, who is somebody who has been on the county commission for a couple of years, but she is previously someone who has had a lot of friction with her peers because she has been the most vocal previously on the county commission in terms of slowing the growth, in terms of, maybe denying more applications that come forward. But she campaigned for and supported some of these people who got elected. And now she is the chair of the county commission, and her folks have got a majority. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens going forward.
So residents obviously feel very strongly about this. Do you get the sense that they're going to be closely watching, holding this commission to account in a different way than perhaps they have done in the past?
I'm not really sure. I think there is a very strong possibility of that. I think a lot of times, sometimes the public comment period, which is when people who come to these meetings and get the chance to come up and share their feelings about a project or an application or something, can trail on for an hour or two at these county commission meetings. And I think a lot of the times the tenor is that, these people are getting up, but it almost feels like it's falling on deaf ears. You have people coming up going, like, begging the commission to listen to the will of the people and do this and that. And it'll be interesting now with people who, actually campaigned on this, who actually committed to this in front of crowds of people, in front of crowds of people who donated money to them in many cases, that they were going to vote this way. And, up to now, you said that agrihood development was denied, but there were a lot of cases over the last several years of developments that were approved by a 4-to-1 vote, with Commissioner Joseph being the only one against. Kind of be interesting to see whether there's going to be legal backlash, whether there's going to be backlash from members of the development community, now that there is a slightly larger possibility of there being 3-to-2 denials from Joseph and folks in her camp.
It does seem when you drive through St. Johns County, and I think it is hard for people to envision something until it's actually there, but you see these, particularly kind of along State Road 16
Mhm.
maybe, or State Road 207, where developments have been approved and then all of a sudden they're there and they're just vast,
Yeah.
really enormous. The traffic impacts are huge. And you can see how it's just a little bit of a shock to the system when people who maybe aren't paying super close attention to every granular level approval can really be caught off guard.
Absolutely, and I mean, the argument does come down to, though, that, locals might not be paying attention to this kind of thing. The folks who already have a home in St. Augustine, who already have a home in Nocatee, Shearwater, any of these big developments might not be paying attention. But if you live up in Minnesota and you're paying attention to when new homes are coming on the market, there's a lot of people who are still trying to move down to this area. I mean, I see it all the time on social media. I run into people in person, people saying, I just moved to St. Johns County a month ago, or I'm looking to move to St. Johns County. So it's tough, that friction between wanting to improve the infrastructure, wanting to make sure the quality of life is maintained, and being able to keep up that pace for the steady stream of people who are moving into this area.
The tax revenue, I guess, will take a hit, right? If there's less development, fewer residential developments. So that's something that commissioners will have to take into account. But it sort of raises that age old question of, does development really pay for itself when it comes to roads and transportation, school needs, all of the infrastructure?
And this is something that the new folks who were elected on the county commission have largely said it is not the case. I was talking to Ann Taylor, the other person who just made it on the county commission this morning last week, and one thing she said to me is, it's not paying for itself. If you look at the dichotomy between how much of the county's tax revenue comes from residential housing and how much comes from other kind of property taxes, commercial, industrial, that kind of thing, it is far and away residential. So the argument is being made by some of the folks on the county commission and some of the folks who were on the county commission before too, that it is residents overwhelmingly who are burdened by those property taxes. And if they could get more business, if they could get more industrial development, some things in there to kind of tilt that a little more away from just homeowners, I think that's what they're looking towards trying to do more of. So it's not anti-growth, it's slow growth and anti-very specific growth.
Well, Noah Hertz, thanks for the update. We're going to circle back with you and stay watching this. It's a really interesting issue.
All right, thank you.